Hi, I'm Jacob McMurray, Senior Curator for Experience Music Project and author of Taking Punk to the Masses, From Nowhere to Nevermind. Over the past 15 years, we've recorded over 800 filmed oral history interviews with people from all stripes of music. These interviews provide a backbone for all of our exhibitions and form one of the most valuable archives that we have in our collection. On this DVD, you'll find a selection of interviews with key figures in the American underground music scene. Some of these include Henry Rollins from Black Flag, Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat, Grant Hart from Husker Du, Jane Wiedlin from the Go-Go's, and Chris Novoselic from Nirvana. Each of these interviews on this DVD represent a wide context for what was happening throughout the United States in the underground music scene from the rise of punk rock in the mid-70s up through the development of grunge and beyond. So thanks for reading Taking Punk to the Masses, From Nowhere to Nevermind, and I hope you enjoy the DVD.
What a lot of people don't realize about punk rock, when it started, it wasn't a certain style of music. It was more like an environment where people that made any kind of music that was kind of outcast from the formulaic rock at the time had a venue to play.
Yeah, it's early 1977. I'm living in a house with two other people, and we got sick of neighbors calling cops on us all the time. We wanted to jam and, you know, have some fun and play some music of our own. And went out. One time we finished up in jail. It was ridiculous. So, you know, I had to find somewhere else to do it. And found this basement. It was like 10,000 square feet. Off Hollywood Boulevard in a building built by Cecil B. DeMille in 1926. It was a gorgeous building, and the basement was all bombed and totally trashed out. Nobody had been in it for at least 15 years, they told me. And there was running water. It was really creepy, no electricity. And I kind of went down there with sparking matches, and it was like this labyrinth, you know, like Jason and the Argonauts, you know, with I had a roll of string, you know, so I'd be able to find my way back, you know, in case I got lost, because I had all these rooms and passages. So it was really, really quite sinister, you know, like literally going into a black hole down these steps. And so I found out who owned the building, you know, and called them up and said that I wanted to rent one of the rooms in the basement, and then they lit it up. And the real estate agent talked me into coming up, you know, taking an option on the whole basement, you know, and there was no plan to do anything other than that room. And that's what I did, you know, took this, an option. I think it was a 60 or a 90-day option to come up with the dough.
And that place became the Mask.
Yeah. Oh, and then it eventually became the Mask later by the summer, midsummer. So I'm in the basement, and you know, I took the option on the one room, and then came up with them and rented out different rooms to other bands that showed up on my doorstep. There was a place called the Columbia Lot, and a lot of bands that used to rehearse there, unknown to me. I had no idea, you know, that the old Columbia Lot was vacant, and so all these bands showed up on my doorstep, including the manager, this irate guy that thought that I was some slick Englishman that had come in to take over his scene. And I'm like, I never heard of the Columbia Lot. I don't even know what that is, what you're talking about.
And this basement property became the Mask, right?
Eventually went, yeah, in about a month, 6 weeks, it kind of, I renamed it the Mask, when a lot of the groups that wanted cheap rehearsal spaces, all I did was I took out these ads in the recycler, because everywhere else was so expensive. That was the whole idea of getting the, you know, I'm not going to pay $10 an hour, you know, to thrash around, because we weren't very good musicians. We were horrible. And so to have cheap rates for other musicians. And then all the bands that showed up on my doorstep happened to be of that persuasion, you know, like underground or not signed or unsigned, outside of the industry totally. Then I asked one of them, where do you guys play? You know, this group that, you know, came from the West, you know, like, you're in here rehearsing every night, where do you play? So they go, nowhere. So it was that simple. The group was called The Controllers. And then I asked them if they wanted to play one weekend. and because there was nothing else. Most of the bands that came in and out of the place, you'd get your own room and your own lock, and you were responsible, you know, you could have access 24 hours a day. That was the deal at the early Mask. And because none of the bands wanted to rehearse on weekends, why don't we have a party? And so I built this little stage, and it was just because there was nothing else to do. And then the Controllers played, and about 20 of 25 people showed up. And then I was introduced to Nicky Beat and Alice Bagg. And Nicky introduced himself, said that his girlfriend, that was Alice, had this other group. And was it possible they could play a party like this? And I just shrugged and said, why not? You know, meaning the following weekend. So the next weekend, the Bags played. You know, there was no big plan to make any money. There was no big plan to have a nightclub. It was totally, I mean, unbelievably primitive and totally innocent and naive. And then there was a series of BYO parties. There was no, you know, everybody just brought their own booze. And the place had no licenses. And went on like that for a while. I always say it was the weirdos that corrupted, you know, by saying, why do we have to play for free? And with me answering, I don't know. It was that dumb and naive, why the bands were playing for free. And then the weirdos wanted me to charge money. And, you know, which I did. It was like $250 or something, because they said, we have overhead, because the weirdos were the big shots.
I got an apartment at the Canterbury, which is where everyone was living on Hollywood, just above Hollywood Boulevard on Cherokee, and just a block away from the Mask, which had just closed down. It was being used primarily, it was being used for private parties, you know, which were shows, but just for the hundreds and hundreds of people in the scene. But, and rehearsals. But I would jam with these bands like the Skulls and the Controllers and stuff, because I never really, the Germs lived in West LA. It was really hard for them to get to Hollywood, and my car didn't work really that good anymore. It was a piece of junk. Long hood and trunk, but it wasn't a very good running car. But eventually, I tried out for them. I got a drum lesson from Nicky Beat, who was amazed at how little I knew about the rudiments of drum playing. And he taught me how to play a Weirdos song, Life of Crime, which was a favorite of mine. So one day, finally, all the Germs, Pat and Lorna and Darby, who was still sort of Bobby Pin at the time, came down to the Mask, and I was supposed to audition. And they didn't know how to audition someone any more than I knew how to audition. And it was just this ridiculous scene. Well, what do? I don't know. I guess we should have them set the drums up somewhere and play something. But all the rooms are booked. Oh, well, there's the bathroom. And there was the bathroom. There was this thing that was a gutted shell of what once perhaps was a bathroom. And it still served the Mask as a bathroom. And there was 3 inches of, like, I don't know what this fluid was. It was a mixture of water and urine and beer, and of course, I guess the urine just being mainly beer as well. But I set my drums up in that. That was the only room that wasn't being used. And I just started banging on them like Mo Tucker or something, thinking they'd be impressed with how punk it sounded. And they just sort of sat there, not looking very excited, and said, could you, like, play a song? And I said, oh, yeah, I could. And I played Life of Crime that I had just been taught by Nicky Beat. And then they went outside the bathroom, the 3 of them, and talked among themselves for a minute. And then Darby came back and said, well, you're a germ. I guess what they said, it turned out, I found out later, was, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? Well, he did drive out here from Arizona. Yeah, I guess so. And then there it was.
The first show the Bags ever did was at the Mask, and we were just driving by. What we did was, once we decided on our lineup, we got all dressed up, and because it was like playing, you know, for us, it was like dressing up and playing rock star, and we put. Of course, we weren't really playing rock star because I'm sure you'd never seen any rock stars that had, like, I was wearing like stockings with green bubbles in them, and of course, like ripped up clothes and a bag over my head that was very decorated, paper bag over my head that was decorated. And I remember Geza's bag was the topic of many discussions because it had a tampon hanging off the end, a bloody tampon. And anyway, so we were walking down Hollywood Boulevard, just sort of drawing attention to ourselves and telling people we're in a band, come and see us. And we had gone to the Whiskey, and we ended up near the Mask, and we didn't know there was a club there. And Geza said, "You guys wait here. I'm going to go get us our first show." So he went downstairs and talked to Brendan, and hyped us up. And at this point, I think we had like 2 or 3 songs, and he's like, "Okay, well, we're playing here." Like, I don't remember, it was in a week or 2 weeks, or something ridiculous like that. And we're headlining, and okay, so we just we protested for a little while, and then just practiced every day and ended up doing it. And the first show, as I said earlier, was just, it was like nothing I'd ever done before.
The Black Flag vibe was, we're going to blow things up, whereas the Circle Jerks were the guys that wanted to party and like, let's have a good time, our day jobs suck and life blows, and let's just, get together at night and orgy and just like make a bunch of noise and have fun. That was our credo, Let's just go out, care about everybody, that comes into the building. See, one of the things that I found while I was in Black Flag was that we were playing and we were just so wrapped up into this intense thing. A lot of times we weren't capable of seeing what was going on around us, so a lot of the things that went on in some of these venues were actually really uncool and not like that great of a thing. We'd go up to San Francisco and there would, fights would break out. Like, well, you're from LA, we're from San Francisco. It was like 2 gangs, and it was like, that's not what it's about. It's about everybody getting together and having a big powwow and having a great time and letting off some steam and jumping around and being aggressive and getting sweaty. And it was basically sex without going through all the sex, all the motions and everything else, all the things that go along with it. Jumping around, getting loose, busting loose, just letting it go. Let it fly, let it rip. But with the Circle Jerks, it was like, do all that, but none of the violence. We don't need violence. We live in a violent world. Why would you want to drag that into where you're playing and you're trying to have a good time? So consequently, the Circle Jerks, as opposed to Black Flag, if they saw anything going on like that, we would stop and just say, look, this is not cool. This is not a good thing. We're here to make friends. It's like you leave here, you go out that door, and everybody wants to beat you down and take something from you. So be strong and have a good time, and that was the bottom line.
I had never given much thought to the factionalizing of it, but I realize now, looking back, that in the early days, what was called the punk scene actually embraced bands like the Nerves, who were complete power pop, but they were considered a punk band. They sponsored the Hollywood Punk Palace and gave the first shot to all these punk bands. There was no distinction. But by the time punk became hardcore, it stopped being like a community of people who were kind of educated and trying to do something conceptual, and started being a younger kind of crowd who had a lot of anger to express. And I think a lot of the older people even in their 20s, weren't comfortable with that, so they went off in different musical directions. And over the next couple of years, you started seeing the beginnings of what became like the Paisley Underground and other things, even probably the hard rock era of Van Halen and Motley Crue, which kind of had a transition with the early punk days. A lot of those bands would play together in the same clubs. There was a great gig I remember at the Starwood where the Circle Jerks and Motley Crue played, and they had a rope down the middle of the audience, and the fans of one band would stand on one side and the other on the other side. It was just an artificial, thing, but it was fun, because they weren't that incompatible, because everybody was considered themselves sort of part of the same scene and having a good time. But later on, they became completely different scenes with different followings and different ideas of what music was supposed to be. And I think that inevitably happens.
Obviously, there were different kinds of punk bands. It wasn't just everyone sounded like the Sex Pistols or something. There was a real broad range. I mean, there were bands that were like real musicians that were bringing in like weird jazz stuff into it, and then there were people on the poppier end, or people like the Dickies that were on the sillier end, or people like the Screamers that were more electronic. With the Go-Go's, we kind of looked to, I think our biggest influence would have been the Buzzcocks, British band that was real poppy punk. And that's what we wanted to do, something that was like fast and furious, but still melodic. The first Go-Go's gig was, I believe, in July of '78, and it was down at the Mask, and it was a big party for the Dickies, who were sort of the first band to get a record deal. And we did 2.5 songs, and we couldn't remember how to play the third song, so we stopped in the middle of it and then replayed one of the first songs. And we were just like a charming disaster. I think people just thought we were sort of cute and funny and entertaining and terrible all at the same time. The idea of like punk as like a genre surviving was just ludicrous, because it was sort of like this totally like homemade, self-created, self-destructing, disposable thing. It wasn't meant to like last. So it's kind of amazed me.
Well, it's really hard to remember, and it's hard to describe. But my main memory is walking down into the Mask and feeling kind of historical about the whole thing from the beginning, from the very first day, feeling like we were truly doing something underground and culturally significant that no one was going to be aware of. And it was very exciting. Pretty much every day was exciting from beginning to end, whether you were going to a show or not, or working on songs or not. And we were pretty wild and pretty drunken and pretty rebellious and very, in our own way, very political. I think that the punk scene was really small. People kind of lose track of that now. Probably about 40 people when it started, or maybe, and then, pretty soon, like maybe 100 or 200 within a year. So it was like a secret society. And anyone fit in if they fit in. It didn't matter if you were 40 or 16, if you were a runaway or a graphic artist or a woman or a man or black or white. Nothing mattered except that if you knew you belonged there, then everyone else knew you belonged there. So it was, to me, that's like the pinnacle of cultural and social activity, is to have a scene like that, that's just driven by ideals. Okay, I don't think X really fit in very well with the punk scene in some ways, and that we didn't fit in very well. Certainly we never fit in commercially, but we never fit in nationally. We were kind of attracted to all the weirdos and the outcasts and the intellectuals. But our look was very different from the other punk bands. We didn't have uniforms, and even then people started in with this uniform thing. People were very individualistic. Then they started kind of conforming, and then when you'd go to towns, you'd see this weird amalgam of people, almost like extras in a movie or something, where they thought that they were looking punk, so they would have long hair, but they would wear like a leather jacket, or they would wear like zebra striped pants really tight, but then they would wear like work boots, and they were trying really hard to look right. Where we just had this kind of individual look that was kind of strange. And so sometimes, like, if you wear like Victorian dresses on stage and all the other girls are thinking that you're supposed to be X-ing, you're supposed to be wearing a kilt or something, they sometimes would think that maybe they were wrong about you being punk. So there was already starting to be, in the early days, like a little split between regimenting what people looked like, which is what we were trying to get away from. So we were fighting a battle with the punks, and especially the hardcore punks, because as you know, when the hardcore punk scene started, it ruined the Hollywood punk scene, because they were at odds with each other. One was kind of violent and one was kind of peaceful, and they clashed.
I mean, it was insane. There were so few people that caught on at that point. But then the Ramones came through, television came through, Blondie came through on their own, and that was still with Gary Valentine playing bass. The Dead Boys and the Damned, and those bands had just as much influence on all the bands here and on us as the sort of gene pool that we were working with. You know? we would go see the Deadbeats or go see the Screamers or the Weirdos or something like that, and the way that somebody played drums, the way somebody played bass, the way their songs were arranged or something like that would start filtering into what you're doing. And that's like a scene. That's when shit starts happening, is when not only do you have the influences you brought to it, but then suddenly there's all these other like-minded bands that are bringing their style of music into what you do.
Punk rock was the deciding factor in my life as far as going from listener to semi-hands-on. Because before punk rock happened in DC, bands were something you saw at the Capitol Center. Zeppelin, Nugent, Aerosmith, we'd go see all these bands. You'd be like 150 miles away looking at this little guy on stage going, whoa, that's Eddie Van Halen, you know? And we'd go do the arena rock thing. And then with the advent of punk rock, all of a sudden you're going to clubs and you're feeling the music because the amp is 5 feet away from you and the singer literally is sweating on you. Or you're being dragged up on stage and made to sing the choruses, and all of a sudden you're involved. All of my friends, who later became pretty well known here and there, a guy like Ian MacKaye from Fugazi, he and I have known each other since we were like 12. We dropped our skateboards and picked up instruments. Well, they did, not me. I picked up the amps. I would carry everything. I was every band's official roadie. So,
what happened was once I started to find out about punk rock stuff, my friends, were lending me records or making me tapes and so forth, and it was so incredible, like just realizing the scope of this, like this underground. And it wasn't just one style of music either, which was something that's pretty important for people to realize, that early punk rock was undefinable. There was certain styles that you might say, okay, well that's like punk because it has like lots of guitars, but there's other people who were playing like, songs on just like kitchen equipment and stuff, and pots and pans and running blenders, and anything was okay. It was sort of more of sort of the approach or the attitude or the sort of kind of the verve these people were kind of operating on that kind of made it qualify.
I mean, early on, punk rock was not a genre. It was an ethos, an approach, an idea. You had people as disparate as Perubu and the Dead Boys, both from the same town, Cleveland. Vastly different approaches, both punk rock. You had, later on, you had the Minutemen and you had Black Flag, essentially from the same neck of the woods, completely different approaches, both punk rock. You had Mission of Burma and the Liars, or the Neats in Boston, different approaches, both punk rock. And down the line, I guess it just got turned into a genre. And I thought that was a really, really sad development, because the whole idea was that you could just do anything you wanted, and anyone could be good if you were inspired. Technique was secondary. And after a while, it got very codified. And I blame hardcore a lot for a lot of that. It was very regimented, very boy, must do it this way. And I mean, the people who sang it even looked like drill sergeants. It was all about conformity as far as I could tell, and that was a stone drag. My first exposure to punk rock was when my friend Andy Crevine came home from England with a pile of posters and records and clothing that he'd gotten from his cousin's shop, which was called Boy. It was a pretty key punk shop, I think, on the King's Road, I'm not sure. And it was just mind-blowing. First, he unrolled this big poster with this British flag with the Queen with a safety pin through her nose, and I was blown away by it was just so nervy. I mean, it was bizarre, and it was so ugly and beautiful at the same time. I can't really describe it. It was really mind-blowing. And then he unfolded this poster of this kind of knock-kneed, nerdy guy scowling at the camera with a guitar in his hand, and that was Elvis Costello. And I saw that poster, and I laughed for 20 minutes. I couldn't stop laughing. The name and this nerdy face, I was incapacitated. And then we put on the record, and it was great. And the Sex Pistols record was great. And all this music rocked. and it was so straightforward, and just what an adrenaline shot that was. And we put on The Damned, you know, neat, and it was just unbelievably exhilarating. It was, as opposed to that kind of more majestic, turgid stuff of The Who, which we were listening to, it was just no comparison. When I first saw Husker Du, my friend Darius got his nose broken slam dancing, so that was a pretty horrific memory. Blood was gushing out his nose. It was horrible. But seeing them, it was overwhelming. They played so fast and so loud. I mean, it really was. It was overwhelming. I don't use that word lightly. It just was so intense, and just it was like a tornado coming off the stage. And it was also kind of just intoxicating and almost hypnotic sometimes, because it was such a blur. You just got overloaded, and it was, I don't know, another overused word is intense. It was just really, really incredible. And when Bob Mould would sing, it was like, you know, a baby screaming. You know, it was like this real primal scream, and he was, you know, one pissed off guy. And for all his malcontents out in the audience, you know, he was our mouthpiece. And then Grant Hart would sing slightly sweeter songs, and that was our other side. And it really was this, you know, very yin and yang type of band. It was everything there. And very intense band to watch. I guess when you saw the Replacements, you weren't sure what you were going to get. You know, sometimes they'd bear down and play an amazing, just blazingly rock and roll set. Just the whole place would be heaving in that way that a good rock band can make a room do. And then sometimes they would just play the most messed up set. They would just start a song, and they'd obviously be really tanked and play it like DeFranco, you know, love, I don't know, that DeFranco family hit, you know, some really cheesy song played halfway and stop. You know, it was really terrible. But kind of fun at the same time, because no one else dared to do that. It was such a novelty at that point. You know, when you went to a rock show, you'd expect them to be well rehearsed and razor sharp and blast through their songs, but they would just play half a song and stop. And you know, if you had a few beers in you too, it was kind of fun. But I mean, live there, each one of them was their own personality. Bob Stinson was this guy who would dress in a tutu or diapers or something, or sometimes nothing at all, and whip off, you know, these amazing guitar solos. Like they would play Rock Around the Clock at, you know, 4 times the normal speed and play the solo note for note. And Paul Westerberg was the suburban thug with the poet's heart, and he was very cool. Tommy Stinson was kind of a Mexican jumping bean, and always kind of dapper in his own funky way. And Chris Mars, I remember, was always just kind of in the back, kind of grimacing with his eyes bugging out, just trying to concentrate on playing as steadily as possible. And he had his own little fan base too. So each guy was interesting in his own right, and that's what makes, I think, one of the really fun rock bands to see live. Is that, you know, everybody's fun to watch, but it was, you know, it really was a shambles, but it rocked. They were great. They were really great, and they didn't care.
We started to tour and just started to become more familiar with all these different scenes all across the country, and that's when I think that really that network was at its in its prime. It was before anyone had gotten any kind of real control over it, so people were just going and putting on shows completely outside of any kind of like industry, outside of the there was no licenses being had, no taxes were being paid. It was in a completely organic sort of rogue operation, but one that was solid and one that was it existed. You know, like you just could call any town basically and find somebody to do a show, and you could just go play, and you know, hundreds of people would come out because the grapevine was so powerful. And I think that the nature of the music was such that people knew that you would never find out about it in the newspaper. You weren't going to hear it on television. There was no advertisements on television. It was really, you understood that it was underground, so you had to have a sense of where to hear it from. That's why I think the flyers were such an important part of the early punk rock, the nature of the punk flyer was so important because that was the secret, that was a secret message. That was where, the code, you would just see flyers and say okay, that's, it was a secret language and only a few people spoke it. I think that people say to me, oh God, well, DC was just every band was just boys. It was all boys, and it was just, boys, boys, boys. But it's funny for me because when I think about the history of the DC punk scene, I don't think of it as boys, actually. And that's because when I think about that punk scene in the early 80s, I don't think about the gigs. I think about the hangs, really. I think about what was going on outside the show. The music was a currency. It was just what we were trading. It's what everyone had in common. But the actual scene itself was what was the exchange of all the individuals who were part of this kind of clique or this kind of small cell of people that kind of identify with this particular music or currency. It was kids for the first time writing their own songs, forming their own bands, putting on their own shows, putting out their own records, putting out their own magazines. It was kids doing that, and it was outside of the industry. It was the part of it was true rock and roll. It was underground. It was out state or government or corporate sponsorship. It was just done on the energy of these kids alone. And I think that it kicked open a lot of doors, and it opened up a sort of an area where later on it became okay for anyone to play music, and it was just part of that. It was part of a process of regaining or reclaiming culture for young people.
Right from the beginning, I know I wanted to be in a band, but I didn't know how to go about doing it because I really didn't know how to play anything. I didn't really have any talent. But that wasn't stopping anyone else. Everybody was doing it. And ultimately, what ended up happening and how the Go-Go's kind of got together by default is all the guys already had bands, at least one band. A lot of people were in 3-4 bands. And the only people left were a few of the girls. A lot of the girls also were in a band. So in spring of '78, some of us girls got together and decided to do the Go-Go's.
In those days, it's probably not much different than it was now. It was pretty easy to put out a record once you just got up the gumption to do it. The hard part is mental, is thinking, I can't be a record company, I'm just a person. But you don't really need to rent a building and get a license or anything like that. All you have to do is go down to a pressing plant with your tape and pay the $500 and you're a record company. Nowadays everybody knows that, but for me at that time, I thought you had to be Warner Brothers to put out a record. So it was kind of a mental leap I had to take, but it wasn't that hard.
We can best express what we want our records to look like, so we'll design the record covers. Instead of being on the phone to somebody who is lining up the engagements, well, we'll call the people up and make the engagement arrangements ourselves. And from there it went into establishing our own music publishing, which is really nothing more than a phone call and filling out some forms. But it can be a crucial thing as far as whether an artist is able to support themselves further on in their life or not. And then when it became big enough to be called a tour company, we branched out, and by the time we broke up, we had 4 different corporations, 2 partnerships, and we were DIY'd to death.
There weren't very many options for a group that sounded like Black Flag at that point. One place we sent a tape was Bomb Records, and they were interested in putting it out. I wasn't really interested in starting a record label because I really felt like I was busy enough already. I had my electronics business was SST Electronics, and I was just really busy with that. That's what I worked at, and then I played music with Black Flag at night, so I wasn't really looking to taking on another, starting a label or something like that, and I knew nothing about that. But Bomp, they wanted to do it, but they just weren't prepared, and we just kept waiting. And then finally realized that they weren't going to be able to do it because of whatever their resources or their situation at the time, even though they liked the music. And that's where I decided, well, okay, I'll put out the single, and well, I have SST Electronics will I'll call it SST Records. And so we ended up putting it out about a year after it was recorded. I figured out how to put records by looking in the phone book and under record pressing, believe it or not, and there was a record pressing plan. I think they were in Hawthorne. I didn't know anything about the process, mastering and this and that. I just said, oh, you can make 7-inch records. Well, that's what I want done. And they said, okay, bring down the tape. And they had a mastering studio right there. I didn't know what it was, and they kind of tuned these things. Oh, that sounds good. And we got it pressed that way. And initially, the single or EP was sold on consignment. We brought it to stores and put it on consignment, which is really difficult to go to a bunch of stores and give them 5 or 20 copies and then try to keep track of it on consignment and try to do business that way. But there was certain stores that it really started selling a lot in, and then they'd call us up and say, oh, could we get some more of those? And so that was, we didn't have any kind of distribution or anything. The other thing we did is we put in some ads in some of the publications like Slash magazine, and there was a few publications that we could put ads in that were kind of appropriate for where we felt people might order it, and we got some orders off that. But the main thing is it gave us something where we could go out and get and play places where it would have something to play for people to try to get booked at different venues.
The two main guys in Black Flag, one guy was Greg Ginn, the guitar player, and Chuck Tukowski, the bass player. Greg invented Black Flag. That was his band. He started SST, and Chuck, became his partner. So here's a band with its own label. We booked ourselves, or Chuck booked the shows. And the whole ethic was, we want control. 100% artistic control, 100% integrity. And no one would touch a band like us as far as an agent. This is back in the days when you'd call, a kid would write you. I think I can get you guys into the Knights of Columbus Hall. We'd go, okay, when? And we would get on the phone with this kid, and this kid would book a show. And you'd get to town and like, well, I couldn't find you guys need a PA, right? Well, I couldn't find one. You're like, okay. So you'd have to get on the phone yourself and get some sound system to come in on a moment's notice. And the kid would be, I'm really sorry, it's okay. He's just a fan. He wants to see the band play in Pontiac. He really wants you to come to his town. So we did a lot of shows like that. And you'd pull into town and the city officials had already come and closed the show down because you had no right to play there. Nobody was asked. The show was basically a washout. So you took it on the chin a few times on the road. But that was the ethic. The whole Black Flag thing is we have total artistic control, total integrity. We don't trust you, and the more money we got, we never made much money, but we wouldn't buy cars and clothes, we would buy control, as in we had our own custom-made sound system for the last few tours. A guy named Dave Ratt has a sound called Rat Sound, who now do Pearl Jam and the Chili Peppers. They're massive. At that point, Dave Ratt just had his truck and a sound system. He developed a system, custom-made it for Black Flag, with 8 18s on each side. I mean, this system would kill you, especially in the places we're dragging it into. And we're all the roadies. I would stack it every day, hang the lights. We'd put the power tap in. I mean, it was our show. And I'd finish on stage. I'd towel off if there was a towel. And kids are still milling around. I'm pulling the PA down and loading it back into the truck. This was back in the days no one asked you for an autograph. So you'd kind of run through the crowd with an 18 cabinet. No one even pay any mind. Because who cares? Just the singer. Big deal. So the whole thing was a very DIY experience. It was no rock star treatment ever. and Greg and Chuck were the hardest working people I have ever met, you know? We're living at SST on the floor of the label. You've got 12-inch mailer boxes everywhere, you know, bugs crawling all over everything. You know, 12-inch mailer boxes became your table. You'd stack up 3, eat your sandwich, brush off the crumbs for the roaches so they could get fed too, and work. And I did mail order in the mailing list. I would like answer all the letters and stuff. We all worked there a little bit, but Greg and Chuck were like the powerhouse work ethic. I mean, they'd wear out anybody you've ever met, like 20 hours a day, ceaseless devotion to the label and to the band. I mean, whenever you were in this band, you were always in awe of Greg Ginn, because he'd always go longer than you, harder than you. You know, you're asleep, he's still up writing music. It was unbelievable to watch him work. I've never seen anything like it before or since. I mean, I've never seen anyone who would just apply himself to one task. So that's how Black Flag survived, was through sheer tenacity. Instead of like paying the rent on a place, we would just live in the van on the road all year. We would orbit America, literally take laps around America. We'd play your town 3 times a year. You get sick of us by September. We'd already been there springtime, summertime, and now we're coming back in October. It's like, oh, you guys again? I mean, by that time, we had people's moms cooking for us. We developed relationships with all these people across America. Moms loved us. Because we're all like, thank you very much. We're all like really nice people. And my mom put up so many SST bands at her place. You'll see her thanked on all these SST records. Vitus, Meat Puppets, Saccharine Trust, Minutemen. They all stay with my mom. Black Flag, she put up Black Flag a good 10 times. Did the laundry, big meals, you know. And they loved her. You know, thank you, Iris. They're all very nice, you know.
You got to understand in those days, you know, it was such a threat to Square Johns. You know, they didn't see it as a way of just playing gigs and making records and tours and flyers and, God, everything that you just take for granted when you saw a big arena rock band. You were in on this, and it was like extension of your personality. They never saw it as they thought it was some weird kind of thing, you know, against rock and roll or whatever. And after a while, it was like, okay, yeah, great, it is against rock and roll then, you know, whatever you're doing, you know, because you couldn't get it over to them. The clothes and all that, the lack of really knowing how to play well, the ideas, because like I said, meeting those people up there was a lot of artists and stuff, and extreme different people, open about the way they were as people and sexuality and stuff. And here, you know, I come from arena rock where you're sitting in the dark in a chair, 1,000 feet. When I started, you know, D. Boone's mom wanted me to play bass, and we didn't really know bass had bigger strings because you were so fucking far away, you know. It was ridiculous. And you didn't have like you do now with the Guitar Center and videos and a lot of stuff you learned on your own. And yeah, you could tell in the pictures there was only 4 strings. I just played a guitar. I thought they had thinner necks. And tune in we thought was like kind of a private thing. You know, hey, I like my strings tighter or looser. We didn't know it really hooked up with a note, you know, like your note had to be. So in a way, if punk wasn't coming, we were all ready for it. But it was even more than that, you know. It was a way of just rethinking your whole point. And, you know, when you're a young man like that, late teens, and Nietzsche and stuff, reading this stuff, and then all of a sudden there's a way, and it was little. It was incredibly little. In fact, maybe some of them people want to be rock stars, but a lot of them you could tell it was just some intense thing they wanted to get into. There wasn't such a climbing thing. I'm sure that went on and stuff, but you understand, being in Pedro, I didn't really know the inner politics. It was just this wild thing I went to that lit us up. And so, yeah, we wanted one too. And yeah, met Greg Ginn in Black Flag. And like I said, he was from Hermosa Beach, 15, 16 miles from us. In fact, nothing to do with us in a way. We're more of a harbor, he's a beach. But we were kind of cut out of the scene. So we did bond together to make our own, which is the story of SST.
Artists decided to take control over their own culture. Okay, they're going to put their own magazines, they're going to design their own clothes, they're going to put out their own records, they were going to come up with their own graphic sensibility, and they weren't going to go to the bank and borrow a bunch of money to hire an attorney to lobby for some kind of major label record contract. Okay, they were just interested in creating art. A lot of the information about this music could only be obtained by writing a letter to somebody for a copy of their zine, because they only printed 500 copies, or driving a couple of hours to the big city to go to the one store that might have one copy of the zine. You really had to work to track down this information. It was not easy. It was all about the infrastructure. The U.S. was really lagging far behind in that department. But I felt that through the touring network that bands like Black Flag really helped to establish, and the zine scene, and the actual record labels who were giving support to the bands, by that coming together, we started to generate some attention.
Then we did the set again. Like, this is like 50 songs. You know, they're all like 2 minutes long. So we played for like 2.5 hours. Then they said, okay, well, we have to go have a band meeting. So you just wait here. They went away for like 10 minutes. I'm just sitting there like, whatever. I mean, I didn't think I was really going to be in this band. I mean, that's a pretty major leap to go from a 60-hour-a-week minimum wage job to being in your favorite band who lives 3,000 miles away from you. That's kind of hard to envision when you're 20 years old, just turned 20. And they came back and they went, all right, so let's do it. I go, what do you mean? They go like, quit your job, get rid of your apartment, get in the van. We're recording the album like in 2 months. I'm like, I'm in Black Flag. And they're like, are you into this or not? I'm like, yes, okay. I got on the train, went back to D.C. I went up to my boss. I said, I quit. He's like, why? I was running his store. He goes, name your price. I go, I don't want your money. I'm going to join this band. And I go, look, if it screws up, I'll come back. Gave away my car, gave away my bed, my desk. I said, here, take it. You need a bed? Here, take it. Gave my car to my old roommate who just got married a few months ago. I just went and saw him. Ian took me down to the Greyhound station. I got on a bus. I met Black Flag in Detroit. And I started roadieing and singing the encores and learning the songs at soundcheck. And we kind of went across back to L.A. with me singing encores, working stage as a bouncer. And then we came back here and started practicing in earnest. And that fall of '81, we recorded the Damaged album, went on tour, and I've been on the road ever since. Like literally averaging about 100 shows a year for 17 years. And I never went back home, It kind of worked out one way or the other. It was a very abrupt lifestyle change. Going from a bank account, car, stereo, job, to a duffel bag, shoplifting food, getting rousted by cops, no money, punk rock, living on people's floors, getting fleas, living in your same clothes for weeks. So one time I bathed in that fountain up near like Sunset and Vine or Hollywood and Vine. There's some big pool, some fountain. I've dunked my head in there. Yeah, I did it. We did all that stuff. All starving bands. Every band can tell you that story. Chili Peppers can tell you that. REM can tell you that. Everyone dined and dashed, And we did our fair share, eating off people's plates in restaurants as they got up to leave. Scarfed the kids' meal because they hardly finished it. I did all that.
So consequently, we were doing a lot of shows on our own. We had the opportunity to play an outdoor picnic in Manhattan Beach on a Sunday afternoon. Peaceful, calm, nice, little band shell next to the little lake, the little pond with the little ducks floating and what have you, all the families, all the children. What had happened was our guitar player, Greg Ginn, had lied to the head of the Department of Parks and Recreation and told him that we were a Fleetwood Mac cover band. Now, what had happened was the U.S. Air Force Orchestra was supposed to play. They were scheduled to play But for some reason they couldn't do it, and this guy called us at the very last minute. Well, we had enough time to get about 400 or 500 people down there, and once we started playing, all hell broke loose. I have never been a part of anything like this since, and that was that the sky rained food. Chicken bones, watermelon rinds, cantaloupe rinds, empty cups, ice, bottles, cans, half-eaten sandwiches, styrofoam containers. Everything was just flying out of the sky. And the guy that was running the program had to stop us every 5 minutes so he could sweep everything up. The crew could just clean all of this garbage up. And everybody went nuts. Everybody just went completely apeshit. And I've never seen anything like that. It was just like, boom, blam, and there you go. All these people jumping up and down. Sky filled with all this crap and garbage and trash and used food and utensils, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience. I, of course, was told and constantly being reminded that there are families here with children and that you have to keep the vulgar language to a minimum, or, you know, we're not going to let you play anymore. Well, we only had about a 20-minute set, so it was like we were on, and half an hour later we were off, and we were all gone, and they were like, good riddance. Thanks, but no thanks.
In the summer of 1980, we actually made it out to the West Coast. We took a Greyhound bus across the country. We got one show in San Francisco. This is our tour. We booked one show in Los Angeles at the Hong Kong Cafe, and we booked one show in San Francisco at the Mabuhay Gardens. And the six of us, this is the four people in the band: Mark Sullivan, who was a singer in the Slinkies, and Henry Rollins, who was Henry Garfield at the time. They were our roadies. The six of us took a Greyhound bus out to Los Angeles with just guitars and drumsticks, and then just got on we just played this show. We made $15 at that show. And then we played at the Mabuhay Gardens. We made $11 at that show. So the tour netted $26, but it was an incredible experience. We tried to do a tour in the summer of 1981. We booked shows all the way across the country. We used the guitar player for Youth Brigade's van, his parents' van, as I remember. And there was, I think it was the two bands, and then about probably 10 or 12 DC kids came along. We're like 14-year-old kids were traveling with us. It was like a caravan. I was driving a 70 Duster. Somebody else had a Volvo station wagon, and we had this van, and we were just caravanning across the country. We made it as far as Madison, Wisconsin, and that's where Tommy, the guitar player, Tommy Clinton, his parents called and said that he could either bring the van back or they weren't going to pay for college. So that was the end of the tour. Those guys turned around and went back, and that was like the end of the tour. We just stopped there. We didn't make it to the West Coast.
You had to go down to the basement level to take the bus to Disneyland. So everybody's in front of me. They've all rounded the corner and going down the stairs, and I was the last one in line and turned around at the guys who were still following us, and I just spur of the moment looked back at them and sort of sneered and grabbed my butt cheek, and just as definitely a gesture of contempt, and then I went down the stairs to the basement as well. And then it turned out that you had to buy your tickets upstairs first. So we all trooped back upstairs to get our tickets, and I was once again the last one in line. And so I'm rounding the corner to go up the stairs, and there's the two security guys, and they grab me and pull me back down around the stairs, and nobody else has noticed that they've taken me. And the guy twisted my arm behind my back and told me I was a real smart ass and all this stuff, and then they put me in handcuffs. And there was an LA cop right there, and I was trying to get him to help out with the situation, but of course he was completely on the rent-a-cop side, So they said, you want to put handcuffs on him? Yeah, yeah, for effect. Yeah. So we came back upstairs, and my friends were all in line buying tickets, and they look over, and there I am being led away in handcuffs. And they put me on a bench in this little office, and you know, I had chains, put chains on my handcuffs, so I'm chained to the bench, and then he's sitting behind his desk with his legs up on the desk, and we're complete babes in the woods, and so innocent and so clean. And I had a little piece of paper in my wallet that my mom had typed out with all the names and addresses of the places that they'd be staying and the phone numbers and stuff. They were on vacation somewhere. But I was 17, and so they said I was still a minor, and they were going to charge me with vagrancy and all this stuff, and they're basically just trying to scare me. But when they finally let me go, they told us all that if they saw us in the station more than 10 minutes before our bus left, that they would throw us all in jail. And so it was after that, then we went out to Disneyland, and they wouldn't let us into Disneyland, and we came back, and it was just kind of a disheartening thing all around. And then we played San Francisco, and we made I think $11, and they had canceled our show, and we had to sort of get ourselves reinserted on the bill, and we would love to have played I think the next night or the previous night, I forget, was an amazing show that we went to at the same club with Flipper and the Dead Kennedys and the Circle Jerks. An unbelievably great bill.
Elliot was the master of that kind of like sadomaso relation with the artist. He did even a better one when Mark and I had to go at the last minute, fly to New York, and get Mick Jagger's permission to have Satisfaction on the record. Because after everything was done and the artwork was done, everything was done, it was like back then laws were a lot more in favor of the artist than they are today, and intellectual property was much more protected than it is today. And because we had changed the music to Satisfaction, and we were singing most of the lyrics to Satisfaction, but had changed a couple of Jagger's lyrics and changed the music, that was not a straight cover, and therefore you had to get permission, because if they didn't like the way you did the song, then the artist could say, no, you can't even put that on a record. Like, they can't stop you from recording it, they can stop you from distributing it. Mark and I played it for, I think it was his manager at the time was Peter Rudge, this kind of like pinstripe, three-piece suit, Savile Row guy, lawyer, with the paisley tie and the shirts with the white cuffs and collar. And he's got an office near the Warwick Hotel, and with a fireplace going, and Mark and I are waiting for a while, and we have our cassette, and Jagger comes in, and Rudge pours him a glass of wine, and he's very cordial and says hello, and he plops down in a big overstuffed club chair and starts drinking his wine, and he goes, all right then, put it on. Let's hear it. And Mark goes over and puts the cassette in this kind of like a boom box on top of the mantle. And, you know, the whacked out drum beat starts, and you see him just looking down and sloshing his wine and taking another drink, and he keeps looking down. He won't look at anybody, and we think, oh God, he hates this. And then the first verse comes in with Mark singing, and Jagger gets up and he walks over and he turns it up, puts the glass of wine down on the mantle, and starts dancing around on this rug in front of the fireplace like Mick Jagger, like doing Mick Jagger. And Mark and I are like, you know, like, we're like sophomoric college kids, like, and he goes, I like it. And so we leave all inflated, and it's great. Everything was great. It was wonderful. And next time we go to the office, and we're telling Elliot how it went, he goes, look, I called Peter and I told him to make sure that Mick said he liked it, because Mick's going to make a lot of money off you guys, and he knows that too. You know, it was education, and it never stopped.
Jerry worked for a janitorial supply company, and like I said, I was a maintenance man at an apartment building, And so we had these catalogs that had all these kind of things in it, and we found these yellow two-piece hazardous waste cleanup suits that were, at the time, they were like $4.30 a piece. And you got these yellow plastic pants that were like Tyvek material that had a piece of elastic in the waistband and 4 snaps on a shirt. And we tucked the shirts in instead of leaving them out so that it was a straight down look. We tucked the shirts in and put this elastic band around our waist, and we totally did not look rock and roll. We looked like we were trying to come up with a new kind of music, which we weren't. And earnestly, we thought that we were going to be the beginning of the end of rock and roll. You know, we didn't have a record company, and we had to stay out of Ohio because nobody in Ohio liked us. But it didn't matter. We didn't care. We found out that we could go to New York, and all of a sudden, after our first show, word got out. They said, there's this really weird band. You got to check them out. And our guest list would be like Lou Reed, David Bowie, Fripp, Brian Eno, all of the Rolling Stones, Frank Zappa's band, Dennis Hopper, Jack Nicholson, all the actors, all the other musicians, John Lennon. You know, everybody would come to our shows, and then we'd get paid at the end of the night, and we'd get like $70, you know, after driving 500 miles from Akron, Ohio to New York. We'd get $70, and that would be enough for gas, and we couldn't get a hotel room, so we'd sleep in the van. And in those days, I remember playing one show, and Brian Eno and Ian Hunter were there. Not Brian Eno, John Lennon and Ian Hunter were there, and we had loaded our equipment back into our van after the show, and John Lennon came out, and there was this one song where, and we started our first album with it, where kind of an ode to the Beatles, an homage. I took the beginning of I Want to Hold Your Hand, because that was the first song that I heard, you know, on Ed Sullivan. It was the first one that drove me crazy, and it made me want to be a musician. Da, 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 da. I put that at the beginning of a song I wrote called Uncontrollable Urge. And so we're sitting there in the van, and I'm like, that's Mott the Hoople, and that's John Lennon. They come walking out, and they're drunk, and John Lennon sees us, and he sticks his head in the I was in the passenger seat, and he sticks his head right here, and he starts singing Uncontrollable Urge to me, and he's drunk, and he's spitting on my face while he's doing it, and he's going, yeah, 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 yeah. And I just remember being like totally in shock, and I was so dumbfounded I couldn't talk to him or anything. I just kind of went, okay. And then they just stumbled down, you know, they just left the club. It wasn't CBGB's, it was Max's Kansas City. And they just, and like the other guys were going, did that happen? What just happened?
Oh, the first show we played out in White Rock, at this like day out on White Rock, which is the beach town in Vancouver. So the entire audience is all these long-haired, greasy rock and roll grease balls, right? Just you know, they were into like Prism and Steely Dan and just this crap, right? You know, and we got up there and played, and all of a sudden people were just throwing lunch bags and garbage, and we started throwing them back, and we went to Skulls, and of course we all had black leather jackets, and like, we're from Vancouver, we're the Skulls, screw you type thing, right? And they're all, and then they come up, they wanted to fight, right? A bunch of these guys started to bum rush the stage, and sort of like, you know, fists were flying, right? And we just sort of like, you know, we got kicked off after about 8 songs, right? And then that's kind of how we got our break, because we formed the Georgia Straight, which is a big weekly mag up in Vancouver and has been around for like 25 years or so. You know, always supported the music scene. And what happened, I phoned the main music writer, Tom Harrison, who's a real great Canadian music journalist. And I said, yeah, my band, the Skulls, we took on White Rock and we won type thing. He goes, who is this? And it's the first time I ever told anybody that my name was Shithead. And I went like, it's Joe Shithead. Okay, Mr. Shithead, tell me what happened. So I told him, and then the next week, it came out in the column. It was like, undoubtedly Vancouver's most hated band, the Skulls. And we went, yeah, we made it, motherfucker, we made it. I played also in Slovenia and Zagreb in Croatia, which was totally bizarre because it just, we did it by train. So every train was just
packed with soldiers. I don't know what's with it. It's sort of like, you know, the general goes, okay, Igor, you take 500 men, go to next town, make sure it's still there, right? So we get on this train, right? But this is where we totally fucked up. DOA met their Waterloo. We were leaving, we had this insane train trip through Yugoslavia, because it was still one country at the time, right? You know, Tito had just died a couple years earlier, but the Federation hadn't split up and started these horrible wars in the early 90s. And we were taking this train trip, and we couldn't get a seat, right? So we're out in the alley, and we've been drinking wine all night. It's about 6 in the morning. We're going to Milan, last show of the tour, then we fly back to London, fly back to Vancouver, right? Okay, easy done, you know, really successful tour. So finally, we get this Ian guy who used to manage Flipper, Ian Stein, Ian Warp 9 Stein, and we go out. We got to get somewhere to sleep. So we find this like car with 6 empty seats in it. It's got this little sign written in like Slovenian, and I go, Ian, what does that say? He says, I don't know. It probably says fuck off, but I don't care. So he grabs the handle and goes, breaks open this car door. So we all go in there, right? And we go in there, and then about 20 minutes later, the train stops, and the conductor comes around, checks our tickets, right? We only have second-class tickets, which means you're out in the aisle. You don't get a seat in Yugoslavia. And one of our roadie guy tells him to, you know, fuck off, right? So next thing we know, all of a sudden the door slams open, the train stopped, and there's 5 guys there, big blue hats, big blue jackets, big long blue trench coats with big red stars in the hat. And they come along, and so how they wake this up, they go, wham, they backhand us all across the face to wake us up, right? Because the conductors told us that we didn't have the tickets. So I go, huh. And Ian, the old Flipper manager, he gets up and tries to take a punch at the head cop. So he gets paid back a couple of, wham, wham, wham. So they put him into line, right? They grab us by the scruff of our collar, they grab our passports and throw us out, literally off the train. So we're going, oh, we're in deep shit. This is not good. And I start thinking, you know what? I bet you Yugoslavian jail cells are not very comfortable, right? So, and we get there, and Ian's wandering around like calling an airstrike, nuke this place. He's drunk out of his mind, right? And I finally shut him up, and we pay the difference between first and second class. We go back in the train, and a bunch of Italians had taken our seats. We're back out in the aisle.
Get back out the aisle. There was a lot of networking. And that's what made it all happen. It's not like Black Flag did anything by itself. We were very much relied upon people. A lot of times it was a young kid in high school renting out a place or convincing a club that they want to do a show there. And they would really go out on a limb, and not for money, just because they want to bring that to their town. That's what I think got Black Flag started touring early. It's just so many people like that in various towns. And through the end of Black Flag, when initially it was just certain cities where we could play, and as the band progressed for 10 years, then it became we could play all these new places, all these small little towns across the country. So our tours became more like 6 months to cover the U.S. because we wanted to play any place where if somebody wanted to book something, we would go there. We didn't turn down anything because we wanted to play all the small places. And I think that really helped to spread what we're doing to a lot of small towns where people didn't, I think encourage people to think that, well, you don't have to move to LA or New York or whatever to try to get exposure. You just do it from where you're at. And in a sense, that's what Black Flag did. Even though we're in the LA area, we may have as well been in Omaha as far as Hollywood was concerned. So we really had to start our own scene in a way.
I realized that we had something the very first time we played, because we started writing in about '76, and at Valentine's Day in 1977, our friends Julia and Gray asked us to play at their party, and that was the first performance, and it was in this little house opposite the taco stand in Athens, and we had to borrow some equipment, some little sound equipment. It was very, very, very basic, but we had some of the amps and stuff on shelves, and literally people were holding them onto the shelves. The floor rocked so much. And Cindy and I had white, she worked at the Whirlicue. It was like a 5 and dime, and the little lunch counter was called the Whirlicue. So across the street was the Diana shop, and I went over there and found these big faux fur pocketbooks, white. So I bought one, and I showed Cindy at the Whirlicue, and she said, "Oh, get me one." So I went over and got the other one, and we turned them upside down and teased them up and had these big white wigs, huge white wigs, and we wore black. And someone brought these Barbie dolls to the performance and, hung them around the ceiling. And it was and someone took pictures, and we still have pictures of that very first performance. And it was just basically in a room like this, or a little bigger, but we almost tore the house down. And it was just our friends. And what was great in Athens is our friends loved to dance. Everybody danced, and, we'd play James Brown, and it was just very, you just put on James Brown, and whether it was lunchtime or whatever, people would get up and dance. So everybody danced at our performance. So we were invited to play at another party. A friend had a party, and we played a few more songs, and she just screamed out, "I can't believe this is happening here at Athens, Georgia." Everyone was dancing and partying. So we had our following of friends, because there was nothing really happening. There was nothing to do in Athens except make up your own fun and go to parties and crash. We crashed a lot of parties, like fraternity kind of parties. And one time we were all dressed up crazy, and we used to go to this disco called the Circus, and it was really, popular to hate disco then, although we really loved disco. But, we'd go, and our friend Megan Timberlake would wear a barrel and nothing else under it. And I'd wear high heels and my hairdo, and we'd cut through this kudzu field. And we couldn't pay the $1 cover charge, so we'd distract we'd run in, and then we would dance and drive everybody off the dance floor, because everyone was in glamour disco outfits, and they would recoil, they'd all run, and we'd dance, and we'd just be punks, kind of. And I remember being down there by the Circus and having these fraternity guys throw bricks at us. It didn't hit us, but, it was just being hostile. And then like a year later, Planet Claire is just booming out of the fraternity house. When Keith came up with the name the B-52s, it incorporated into that whole image were beehives, because we were wearing these wigs to parties and all, and also his vision was these women playing keyboards with beehive hairdos, and that's what our slang term for a B-52 was, the nose cone kind of beehive hairdo. So to us, it was just totally a hairdo. We never even thought, oh my God, it's a killing machine. We thought of it more of death by hairspray. So, there was no association in our minds, even though it's so obvious. It was more like it was in our own little world. It's like, oh, it's a hairdo. And when we went on our first tour and went to Japan, we started thinking, oh my God, we can't. We had just started. We can't keep this name. We can't have the B-52s and go to Japan. But so Island had this whole campaign, and we thought of all these. We spent days and days and days trying to think of other names, the Attack Elephants and all these other names. Nothing seemed right, so we kept the B-52s. And Island had this big campaign, postcards with a wig and a bomber, and it said this, not this, and all this explanation of it's not a bomber. We get over to Japan, and they had the promoters made these posters of bombs dropping. It was our first album cover, and above us bombs were dropping, and it said the B-52s bombed Japan, and they just made a whole thing out of it. They kind of ran with it. So I guess it wasn't as they knew they got it.
The last big black show was set up in Seattle by a guy named Larry Reed. Somehow or another, he talked the Boeing company into letting us use a disused power generating facility as a venue, and it was on Boeing Field. I cannot imagine something like that happening now with all the blockades and security and that kind of stuff. But he convinced them that this would be a good idea, and so there was a stage constructed and a PA assembled, and we played a show in a disused steam plant on Boeing Field. And there were planes taking off from runways behind us, planes taking off over our heads throughout the show. It was a great environment. There were these giant tools everywhere. Like you'd see a wrench just leaning up against the wall, and the wrench is 6 feet long. It'd take 3 people to lift it. Like a circuit breaker the size of a Volkswagen. That kind of thing. It was a really great environment. It was really visually arresting, and there were a lot of nooks and crannies to explore and that kind of thing. Apparently, it was the largest cast concrete structure in North America or something like that when it was built. And then we finished that show. When we finished the show, we hadn't really, it was kind of unspoken, but I think we all kind of suspected that when we finished our last show, we were going to trash all of our equipment. So we did. We broke all of our stuff. And I had a guitar made for me by a guitar shop in Evanston. And it was a really nice guitar. It was kind of I'd always liked the shape of a Telecaster guitar, but I had always wanted it to be a double cutaway, so it would be symmetrical, So I convinced this guitar shop to make me one. And then I smashed it up. And the guys in the guitar shop got wind of that I had smashed up their guitar. And so when I went in there to ask them to make me another one, they did it, but they charged me a lot more. They charged me double for the second one. I think they thought I might just be having them make stuff so I could break it.
We had a van in '87. It was Hero's van. It had no windows, no air conditioning. And that's what we took in very hot weather down the West Coast. We knew we needed a van that was bigger to haul more gear and that perhaps had working air conditioning and windows so we weren't in this oven for long stretches of time. We went to buy, Hero did most of it, shopped around looking for a van that would suit the needs because he wanted to be his. And so we found this '86 Beauville, and I think we found it in early '88, so it was a good deal. Bought it, and Hero went and built in the back a futon frame so that the relieved driver can go and rest on top of the futon frame on the mattress. And underneath the futon, we stored our luggage and amps and guitars. And we did a tour that way, I think, all the way back to New York, played Boston, a few small clubs, and a West Coast tour. Then we had a bigger tour booked by SST and their brother business, which is Global, and they booked this whole tour. And it was a little bit more thorough. We were touring with a band called Sylvia Juncosa, and she was opening for us, and I think she had made a record on SST then. Now we got a U-Haul, so we put all the amps in the U-Haul, but the more intimate articles, like the guitars and our underwear, we put underneath the futon frame, which was also underneath the relieved driver. And that did a couple months around the U.S., up through the South in Texas and Florida. And it even got pulled over in Louisiana by some local sheriff's deputies and sheriffs and a few DEA agents, and they went through the damn thing on the side of the road, and we were trying to make it to New Orleans, and we were in Lake Charles. So there, the van helped us. It was a workhorse and got us around the country, and it also had to experience some humiliation itself by having its anal cavity probed in Louisiana. Not us, though. We just stood on the side of the road and looked at lizards. So after that, the van, we ended up touring as of 1990 in tour buses, and we were given tour support by A&M Records. And so with that money, we invested in renting a tour bus. And it was great now because now everyone could sleep, and none of us had to drive. And the gear then would go by truck, and the more intimate gear, like our guitars, we'd keep on the bus. The van was then used by all individuals would share because at some point it was transferred from Hero to the band. It became a band. I became a band property, but who the hell knows what happened to the title between then and you guys having it. So the van was used for recreation. You know, Chris would take it out camping. I would use it to move and just to drive around locally. Hero would use it in the same way until 1990 when Hero left the band then. So we would use it, and other bands through Silver Management would also use it. Alice in Chains use it if they're hauling gear. We would take gear to and from recording studios, rehearsal studios, gigs. We were playing locally in the Paramount or the Moore Theater. It was the van that got our equipment there.
I met J Mascis when I was maybe 15 years old. Jay went to a lot of the shows that I went to. He lived in Amherst at the time, and he would drive into Boston. He would take his parents' station wagon, and he went to all of the same shows that I went to. He just had to drive an hour longer. And Jay always wore the same t-shirt. It was a Tricks Are for Kids shirt. It's the only one he ever wore. And he looked really fucked up. I mean, he looked like a fucking train wreck. His hair, we actually used to call him, before we knew him, we called him Chemo Boy, because he had these long strands of hair shooting out, and then there'd be chunks that were just shaved to the scalp. And he just looked like a weird-ass slug that got run over by a car. But he was, he also seemed like a really nice guy. But I don't think I really met him, even though I'd see him around and I was around him, and you know, maybe we would hang out with some of the people from his, you know, group that he was hanging out with. But I didn't really get to know him until I was a senior in high school, and my sister went to college, and she ended up being put in the same dorm that Jay was in, and they became really close friends. And Jay came to my house he came to the house to visit my sister, their first semester in college. And that was the first time my entire family met Jay, and it was not good. He came in, he wouldn't take his gloves off. He had these ski gloves, they were huge. He looked like Frankenmonster. And he had this ski coat, and he wouldn't take that off either, so he just kind of walked around the house like this. And my mother kept saying, "What? Aren't you gonna take your coat off, Jay? Aren't you gonna take your gloves off? What the hell? Did I not put the heat up enough?" It was like, "No, the heat's fine." But eventually, my mom hates cooking for people. She hated cooking for us. And so Jay was there, and he didn't leave before dinner, and she was like, "Fuck, I'm gonna have to make him some food." So she came downstairs, and she goes, "Jay, what do you want for supper?" And he goes, "I don't care." And she said, "What if I put a piece of shit on a plate? Will you eat that?" And he goes, "Probably not." So eventually, my mom was afraid that Jay was gonna knock up my sister because he wasn't leaving, and she hadn't been told that he was gonna spend the night. So he ended up sleeping on the couch in the family room, but my sister kept sneaking in just to hang out with him and listen to music or chat. And my mother got no sleep, and so she was pissed off and furious the next morning, and she was kind of being a little bit bratty to Jay, and Jay was being bratty right back to her. And finally he broke. He couldn't handle it, and he turned around in the middle of the house downstairs. We had this big hallway, and like all the rooms came off of that hallway, and he stood in the middle of it, and he goes, "You people are fucked." And my mother just like went, she didn't know what to do, so she ran up the stairs, and she was like, "Jimmy," my dad, "Jimmy, did you hear what Jay says? He says we're fucked. Jay just says we're fucked." And he stormed out the front door, and my sister was like, "I'm not staying," and she grabbed her bags, and I was left there. I was like, fuck, I'm stuck. But that's how J Mascis was introduced to our family. I've known him for a long time.
But the rock vans, the replacements, we had only a couple of them, and they always had names. Bert was the first one, and it was just because I think Bob wrote Bert on the side of it, so we decided that one was Bert. And then the other one was called like Odie, which was short for odorous, because it was like always always stunk. And the Replacements never used to build lofts or living quarters in vans. What they would do is deconstruct it as the tour went on. Like, you know, you'd get in the van one morning and a chair would be gone, or a bench would be gone, or a seat belt, something would be torn out and thrown away. And I remember one time Peter Jesperson pulled me over on the highway and he's like, said, "You got to drive these guys." They had this RV, and he's like, "I'm going to take the gear. You got to drive these guys." I'm like, "All right, whatever." So I get in there, and they had torn apart, like the toilets and everything was all torn apart, and they'd somehow gotten a bunch of house paint, and they were repainting the inside of the thing and just throwing the paint around. And we had to cross the Canadian border. And I get to the Canadian border, and Jesperson had their passports. And the guy's like, you know, "All right, pull into the bay. We got to take a look." And they load all the band into a room, and the guy comes out to me, and he's in his, you know, and he's in his fresh uniform, and he's like, "I got to take a look." And I go, "Well, you know, I don't care, but I recommend not going in there." And he's like, "Well, I got to take a look." He's like, and I'm like, "All right, whatever." And I open the door, and he walks in there. He steps back out in about 2 seconds with a big smear of paint on his uniform. And he just looks at me, and he goes, "Get these fuckers out of here." That's just like, at the time, I took that van, we got to Cleveland, that RV, and I went and I parked it in the worst neighborhood I could think of, downtown Cleveland, left the keys in it, and the wet windows were left down, figuring now it can get stolen, I can make an insurance claim. No, the next morning, that thing's still there. And we played at the White House, and that was a funny thing, because we knew we were going to take a ton of heat for that. You know, it was like, and I remember Murphy called me, he's like, "What do you think?" And I had the line, "Well, you know, Dan, you're not going to win the World Series, so you might as well take this invitation," you know. And they had us like locked up in this like basement room. It was like the band room, you know, but it was like the marching band room. And, you know, and we were like trying to pick the locks to get the marching band uniforms out, thinking, you know, of course, you know, but they're pretty good locks in the White House, whatever. And I had like my own Secret Service guy walking me around the halls, because I was the only guy that could go anywhere, but I had to have this big guy with me, you know. And you're walking down these halls and you can hear the clip-clop of your heels, you know. And so we're walking down the hall, and he grabs me and he goes in here and he throws me in this room, and it's like the Hall of the First Ladies. And it's like got all their portraits, you know, and like, you know, and like Nancy Reagan's is exactly like Jackie O's. It's just hilarious. It's like just complete copy. And I'm just sitting there kind of laughing. Like, then he like grabs me and goes, "All right, it's all right to go." And I go, "What was that?" He goes, "First Lady." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" And I go, "Did you hear her? What'd you know?" He goes, "I can smell her AIDS perfume from a mile." And I'm just like, okay. So, and then, you know, they wanted us to play an intro for the president as he walked up, and I'm like, well, you know, we're already going to take a ton of heat being a rock band at the White House. You know, I'm like, you know, so maybe, you know, we can pass on doing the soundbite backdrop for the president. And they all just looked at me like, you know, how can you say that about the most powerful man in the world? And I'm like, well, you know, I'm worried about what, you know, the rock press is going to say tomorrow after we do this. We're already going to get hammered for this, you know. And but then we got to go in and meet the guy, and we walk in, and right away he's talking about Monk and stuff like that, and like everybody's like, "This guy's so cool." He's just so, you know. We get out there, and he's walking up, and I look at the guys, and I go, "Play some Fleetwood Mac, come on." And they're like, "All right," you know. So we did it for him, you know.
It was in 1983. 1982, I met Buzz Osborne and Matt Lucan, and they were in this band called the Melvins. And I was working at a Taco Bell, and there was this kid, Bill, who was expelled from Aberdeen High School because he had lit off a pipe bomb. It was nuts. I don't know why the heck he did it. And he was like expelled, which was like Bill Hull was his name, and so he knew these dudes were from Montesano, and so Bill worked at the Taco Bell. And he put a CH at the end of Bell on his hat. It's a Taco Belch on it. And like, so these dudes came in with like, you know, with these like armbands on, or kind of like these wristbands, and they were, you know, and they were in like punk rock music. And I've been like, back then there was like a cultural chasm. Like, if you were into punk rock, you were really weird, and you could get beat up, right? There was like the establishment people who were like, "Hey man, we're into the good old music, you know, driving around in Camaros or whatever." And the punk rock people are on skateboards, or I drove Volkswagens. Okay, see, I always been, you know, Volkswagen. I drove a Volkswagen bus, but how cars work in American culture. But it was Buzz and Matt and Mike. They had the drummer Mike, and you know, and Buzz was a punk evangelist. He would just go around and like preach that punk rock is the way, man. This is the new sound, and this is like I recognize him because I read I was in Montesano like a couple years before, and I got a hold of the Vidette, I think, the school newspaper, and there was a column by like Buzz Osborne about why punk rock is like superior to conventional rock and roll. And I thought,
I was in my sophomore year at Roosevelt High School, and me and Nick Scott, who was the drummer for Psychopop, and Chris Crass, who a notorious local figure, were hanging out. We were listening to a Generation X tape on a cassette player in the smoking area, the parking lot of Roosevelt High School, and we noticed this kid with kind of long hair and a Ted Nugent t-shirt came up, and he was kind of tapping his foot and bobbing his head to Generation X. We were all, "You like this stuff?" you know? And that was how I met Charlie Ryan, who became the drummer for the U-Men. We both kind of dropped out of high school, moved in various apartments with various girlfriends downtown and in the U District. We eventually moved into a beat-up old house with Rob Morgan, yet another legendary local figure. And that was a great experience living with him because he had the most amazing record collection. And Charlie and I listened to all kinds of stuff he had, everything from Throbbing Gristle to Dick Dale, you know, just all kinds of stuff. And his record collection really kind of shaped what me and Charlie wanted to do to a certain extent. At that time, I felt that I wanted to start a new band. I felt that it was important to try and do something different and not just play straight punk rock anymore. I'm not sure why I felt it was important, but you know, I recognized that there was some kind of new and different stuff going on. Public Image Limited was a band Charlie and I liked a lot. Per Ubu, Throbbing Gristle, stuff like that. And so we just started playing in the basement, just got a hold of a guitar and an amp and about half of a drum kit, and just started making noise in the basement. I guess you could say we kind of felt like a little out of place because we were kind of associated with, Charlie and I were both kind of associated with the earlier punk scene, but we were both young, and we were more the age of the hardcore kids hanging out on the Ave, so we were kind of friends with everyone and no one. So we decided that we should consciously decided that we should not play hardcore or straight ahead punk rock. Again, maybe a little under the influence of the Blackouts, seeing how they were really trying to do something different. And but that was all pretty much pretension. We had such limited equipment and such limited ability. Our ability to make the music we heard in our heads actually come out of amplifiers was limited at best. But we gradually found a bass player. Her name was Robbie Buchan. She was 15 years old. She had run away from her dad's house in Anchorage, or maybe Fairbanks, Alaska. Moved in with us into the house, and then we started looking for a singer, and we were at a party at a house it was called the Cleveland House, and there were a bunch of Bopo boys hanging out, and pretty much the usual crew. And there was a guy we'd been seeing around for a while named John Bigley, who was a year or two older than us. And at that party at Cleveland, I actually saw him fall down a flight of stairs and go through a window at the bottom of the stairs and fall about 5 or 6 feet to the ground below, which was actually not that unusual an occurrence at that time. You'd see stuff like that. But I saw him do that, and I went over to the window and looked down, and he had this great expression on his face, like, "What happened? Who pushed me?" And it's, well, you just fell down the stairs and went through the window or whatever. And for some reason at that point, when I saw him lying there on his back with broken glass everywhere, with this great expression on his face, I immediately went over to Charlie Ryan and said, "Man, we should get that guy to be our singer." And no idea if he could sing or anything. And he wasn't a particularly friendly or outgoing guy. We were a little scared of him, but finally Robbie went and asked him to come to one of our practices, and he did. And I wish I could say instantly it just clicked. He was great. We didn't click instantly. We didn't really know each other hardly at all, and he had never sung before. But one thing he did do that I thought was great is he didn't have any lyrics for any of the songs, so he'd just pick up stuff that was lying around in the basement, like a jug of fabric softener or a can of paint or whatever, and he'd just kind of, or a magazine, and just kind of start singing whatever was written there, which I thought was really cool. And it took a while for it to really come together, but that's how it got started.
It was very unusual for Bumbershoot at the time to book any hardcore punk acts. But we managed to book the band. I had a relationship with Bumbershoot, somewhat tenuous, which would become more tenuous after this. But it paid pretty well. We played at the Mural Amphitheater following the Young Fresh Fellows. The Young Fresh Fellows were a great, interesting band, but they weren't punk. The U-Men were punk. So we played at the Mural Amphitheater, which at the time had this great, it was a Horiuchi mural it was built out over a little pond. It was just wonderful. Pastoral setting, and we had this idea. Actually, one of the drummer in the band, Charlie Ryan, who's a bit of a pyromaniac, had this idea to pour lighter fluid on the pond and set it on fire. That was as far as the idea went. We weren't entirely sure that pouring lighter fluid on water was going to work, so we went up to my apartment, filled up the bathtub, poured some lighter fluid on it, and set the bathroom on fire. And it was like, the curtains were on fire. It was a fire alarm went off in the apartment building. And I just remember we were all standing around going, this is going to be great. At any rate, well, the fire department actually came up to the apartment, and we were like, there's no fire here. And that's at any rate, we knew it was going to work. So the day of the show, we filled up a couple of bottles half gallons of vodka with lighter fluid. It turns out that might have been overkill. Myself and our roadie, Mike Tucker, who would later go on to be a very successful film director. Myself and the roadie, this was, just prior to us leaving on tour, at one point, just as it was getting dark, in this wonderful setting, went to the edge of the stage, and we each poured this half gallon of what the audience thought was vodka. That sort of excited the audience a little bit. The singer came out from behind the stage with a broom, a straw broom that had been soaked in lighter fluid, and is sort of doing this dance with this wand of fire. It was really pretty phenomenal. And then sort of at a predetermined moment, touched the broom to the pond, and it pretty much exploded in a huge ball of flame. There's photographs that exist of this, and it was a little too much lighter fluid. What we didn't consider when we set my bathroom on fire was that the mural amphitheater stage was built out over the pond. I don't know why we didn't think of this, but of course the lighter fluid went under the stage, and when we ignited it, it lit under the stage, and it was creosote, and it was tinder dry. It was the underneath of a stage, and smoke was just billowing out of the side of the, it was tar and creosote, and the fire didn't last long. The lighter fluid pretty much explodes, and then 15, 20 seconds later it burns itself out. But the billows of smoke from underneath the stage kept going, and the crowd was going absolutely nuts. The PA, it was Tommy O'Neill, was seismic. He was afraid that it looked for all the world like the stage was on fire, which it wasn't. It was just smoking. But he's like trying to drag all of his PA gear off the stage because he doesn't want to go up on smoke. This is the first day of bumper shoot, and he didn't want to burn up his entire PA. I didn't care because we were leaving. And the cops waded into the audience because cops, being cops, their reaction to something was to beat people's heads in with their nightsticks. And I'm standing on the stage watching, this is just craziness. The human didn't stop playing. The guy's dragging off his PA. The crowd's going nuts. The cops are like wading into the audience, just randomly beating people for absolutely no reason. And I was like, I'm going to get the hell out of here. And I just took off. But I got in trouble.
Mr. Rep was around for maybe two and a half, 3 years, something like that. We played a fair amount of gigs. The first one we ever did was opening for Student Nurse, which was the owner of Roboto Records band, and by the end we were playing the Metropolis, and people actually sort of liked us. The last show we did, Darren and Todd's dad owned a hair salon, and so they bagged the hair sweepings off the floor, and the last show we just threw that out into the crowd. It wasn't a very nice or smart thing to do, but we were into it. Maybe 1986, Green River was asked to open up for Public Image at the Paramount, and we were more than pleased to do it. And we got there, brought our equipment there for sound check, and the stage was like so crowded with keyboards and everything. We're like, there's no room for our amps and everything, and we're like, well, where are we going to put our stuff? And they said, well, you'll just have to make do with what you've got. We're a 5-piece band, like 2 guitars and a singer hopping around like an idiot. and basically told the roadies that, well, you better move the stuff or we can't like guarantee the stuff isn't going to be broken. so they kind of did. And, but there's like X marks the spots for like where everything was. And right in front of like the mic in the center was this like piece of paper that said, JL's mic. So I took a Sharpie and crossed out JL and wrote MA. And, just sort of this really bad vibe that we were getting from P.I.L, which we beforehand imagined would be like kind of cool people, but this real like heavy rock star kind of trip like really started to work on us.
Sorry. Let's just pick up at the Paramount there
Okay,
again. When you,
so I think I was saying P.I.L's heavy rock star vibe or trip had just kind of rubbed us the wrong way. And, well, before they left, they went back to their hotels or whatever, Johnny was just bitching about there not being a lazy boy in his room, which was like, 6 flights up. I don't even know how they would have gotten a lazy boy up there, but apparently like this specific type of lazy boy was in his rider and it had to be like backstage wherever he was. So we're just like, oh my God, whatever. And we just spent the whole time there while they were at their hotel drinking their beer. Andrew Wood drank Johnny Lydon's wine, and they had a deli tray when their bus pulled up and they were coming back from the hotel. We were like slinging the meat at them. So as soon as our set was over, we were promptly kicked out of the Paramount. The show itself was really, really weird. We were the opening band, and we were basically playing while people were getting their seats, and it was assigned seats. So basically, there'd be like a couple people over there, a couple people over there, and this huge gulf between like the edge of the stage and the first row of seats. And that was a really alien experience for a band that was used to playing, say, the Ditto Tavern and the Vogue, where everything was really intimate and in your face. The Rainbow, places like that.
I think one of the things that really distinguished Sub Pop was its emphasis on branding. And some of that occurred organically, just through the multiple uses of the name Sub Pop itself. Okay, it was a radio show, it was a fanzine, it was a column. The name just got used over and over again. And I felt that by the time we actually started putting out records, that the name Sub Pop had really gotten around. I had been working with Sub Pop as a conveyor of information for, since 1980. So in effect, because the project kept morphing and kept recycling itself, it was naturally kind of I was naturally creating a brand. Over and above that, when we started putting out the records, I was very conscious of the success of labels like Factory and 4AD that had a very specific look, had a very specific sound, and I thought that was a more mature way to approach putting out records. And I wasn't really seeing that in a lot of what was going on in the American underground. SST had one gentleman spot who did most of their recordings. Raymond Pettibone, the illustrator, did a lot of their covers. So they had they had kind of a focus and a feel for what they were doing. And in Sub Pop's case, with the photography of Charles Peterson and to a lesser extent Michael Levine in New York, we had a look, and we worked with real simple sans serif typeface. So there was a real emphasis on giving focus to the graphics and maintaining a certain uniformity with the sound through the production of Jack and Dino. And I thought that was key as far as establishing a label identity. In addition to all that, Jonathan and I had a particular philosophy that was very anti-punk, and that was we would do interviews with anybody, and the idea was to get the name Sub Pop out there in any way we could. And there were a lot of labels or artists who wouldn't think of like doing an interview for the Costco newsletter, but we would do that. Or NPR wants to do an interview, great. So we had this philosophy that we would never turn down an interview for any reason for anybody, and we wanted the name Sub Pop to just permeate the culture.
Yeah, Bruce Pavitt was a connoisseur of music history, and he really saw that the label needed sort of an identity and a branding to sort of make it more than it was, to maybe even go beyond labels such as Homestead or Touch and Go, and you know, he wanted it to be a regional thing yet have farther reach than that. And he saw the need for a cohesive producer, for a cohesive design, and for photography. He wanted to see sort of a cohesive style of photography on the record sleeves. So it was about with Sub Pop 200 that all gelled for good. When he had the idea of let's put out a triple box set, which was unheard of at the time. You know, I mean, I think the only thing that had come before that was like the Clash's Sandinista, you know, which was in the industry considered pretty much a failure. So it's like, let's put out a triple box set and put a 16-page booklet in it. And I was like, great, you know, because that was going to be 16 pages of my photographs. And it worked. Yeah, it really drove home the personality and the character of these bands, and the sort of the family aspect of it, and the excitement of the gigs, and so yeah, that's kind of really when it first came together. And this was what, 88?
I'd already been recording my own band in this other studio. I'd already been working with Green River. Kim Thiel was my neighbor, actually. You know, we'd jam in my basement with my little 4-track machine. This was all before I started working at Reciprocal Recording when it opened. So when I started working at this 8-track studio it was July of 1986, actually. July 1st was the opening day. Some of my very first clients, right within the first couple of months, were Soundgarden and Green River, and of course my own band. So I was already recording these bands before there was any talk of a Sub Pop label. At that point, Bruce Pavitt was running a fanzine in Olympia, and actually he was writing a guest column in the Rocket magazine called the Sub Pop column. It was in the back. And it was just reviews of interesting indie records that had come out, not necessarily from the Northwest. It was just anything. And John Poneman was, I believe, working at KCMU and also working freelance as a show promoter, putting shows on in various venues. And that's all right. They will tell you the story of Sub Pop much more than I can, because from my standpoint, I was already working with a lot of the bands who ended up on Sub Pop. And in fact, some of the recordings were made before there was a Sub Pop. We were already working on the Green River recordings that became Dry as a Bone. We were already working on the recordings that became Screaming Life. I had already been recording the Thrown Ups, who sort of were kind of Steve Turner's stepping back into the music scene after having been out of Green River for a few years, and that sort of indirectly led to Mudhoney a little later. So I'd already been recording a band called H-Hour, which had moved here from Boise, and this band's drummer was named Tad Doyle. And so, you know, basically a lot of the players in the drama were already in place. And there we were, you know, I was making recordings for these people, and Bruce and John put their heads together and said, well, you know, there's these recordings being made. Maybe some people would buy these. why don't we start a record label? We can put out a Green River record, maybe put out a Soundgarden record, see if anybody cares. So here comes January of 1988, and who calls me up but a fellow named Kurt Cobain calls me up at the studio and says, well, I'm friends with the Melvins, and, Dale is still here. He hasn't moved to San Francisco. Buzz went to San Francisco. I think maybe Dale's going to follow him. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what the story was, but Dale Crover was still here. The Melvins were technically broken up, but Dale was helping this guy, Kurt Cobain, who was a friend of his from Aberdeen. They'd grown up together. And so Kurt, he didn't have a band name. He just said, well, I want to come in and just record some songs. We don't have much money. We just need to, we want to book like one afternoon and just see what we get done. And I figured, well, okay, if Dale's playing with you, you must be okay, because Dale was a great drummer and still is a very great drummer. Really, Dale Crover was one of the best drummers on the scene in that time, and was, even in 1988, very highly respected among all the other drummers in town as just being a monster of a player. I can remember Melvin shows where, there'd be like 3 other drummers would be standing right by the side of the stage, just watching, checking Dale out, watching him play the drums. There'd be our drummer and maybe Dan Peters and maybe, somebody else. They'd all be just watching Dale Crover, checking out the drummer. So Dale was a great drummer, and I knew that whoever this was, Kurt Cobain, I didn't know who he was. Maybe this was going to be interesting. And I had never had a chance to record the Melvins, but hey, well, at least I can record their drummer now. So they came up January 23rd of 1988 and recorded, in one afternoon, we recorded 10 songs and mixed them. I think they probably showed up at noon. By 3 o'clock, we were done recording. And then, by 5 o'clock, I had mixed 10 songs, and they were out the door because they were playing a show that night in Tacoma at the Community World Theater. Under, I don't even know what name they were billed under. It might have been Ted, Ed, Fred, or some straight. It wasn't Nirvana. They were not billed as Nirvana at the time. And Dale Crover told me later that that was the only show he actually played with them during that time period. He did the recording, he did some rehearsals, they did the recording with me. They went and played the show that night and played the songs in the same order that they recorded them on the reel of tape. Kurt was actually, you could tell Kurt was actually kind of the riffs and the words were obviously from him, but Christ was the most outgoing member. I mean, Christ was the one doing a lot of the talking, a lot of the planning, and just, he was the guy who seemed like he was, making sure that things got done, and was, kind of the tall guy jumping around with a lot of energy, and, always had something positive to say and so forth. And Kurt was a little more, quiet, a little shy, never a bad word for anybody really, but, low key. Until you got him on a microphone and he opened up his throat and screamed, and you thought, whoa, look at that. But Chris actually did a lot of the talking initially, because he was just more outgoing and could, I think he was probably the guy who was, more able to, deal with the club promoters and, just talk to people and say, look, what are we doing here? And, whereas Kurt was kind of more just sort of in his head, with the music. And, I didn't see them, they didn't tell each other what to do. It seemed like Chris just knew what to play. I never saw Kurt telling him what to play. It seemed like Chris just knew exactly what he should be playing. There was some sort of unspoken thing between those guys where they just knew, they just worked together and knew exactly what they were doing. They grew up together, They'd probably been playing music together since before they could play instruments. So there was definitely a chemistry between Kurt and Chris, and those bass lines were very strong, and they worked in a certain way to sort of pull it all together. I mean, if you take those bass lines away, you just have a bunch of guitar riffs. You put those bass lines on it and you have Nirvana. So at the same time, without that voice, you would just have, a hard rock band doing a vaguely 70s inspired riff rock. You put that voice on it and it's, what is it? Is it punk rock? Is it the Beatles? What is it exactly? You don't know. The interesting thing is that the voice was not following the guitar riffs. The melodies were independent of the guitar riffing and independent of the bass lines. Even from the very earliest material, Kurt had a sense of melody that was completely separate from, like it was basically counter melodies, entirely separate from the riffs that he was playing, which was not that common in the underground bands and certainly very rare in the punk bands. In fact, any kind of melody was not that common among the bands I was working with in those days. So it sort of stood out to me as like, okay, they're going the extra mile here. Even though they can barely play their instruments yet, there's something conceptually here. These guys are on the right track.
The motorsports show was really exciting, even in the making and in the weeks building up to it, because there was talk about this show where you'd have the Dwarves, the Derelicts, and the Melvins, and Nirvana playing at this show, and Nirvana were headlining, which was, we were all a little bit surprised that they had moved into that position. But at the same time, around that period of time, Sliver had come out, and it was a single that had a few other songs on it, and one in particular was called Dive. And I remember recording it onto a cassette and playing it in my old station wagon as I drive around town. And I kind of couldn't get over how great these songs were, even compared to Bleach. I thought that they were moving into some places as a band that it just wasn't even like Seattle anymore, what they were up to. So I was excited to go see the show. And I remember when the day came around, I went down there, and again, the venue was so unlike things we were seeing in Seattle at that time. I mean, we were going to a lot of shows in like the Vogue and the Color Box and the Central, and now this is an old auto body shop, similar to kind of what like I experienced in Spokane. And it's got all these old broken out windows, and it was really a big crowd in there. It was a pretty good sized place, but a lot of broken bottles, kids sitting around in the doorway, blood, it didn't feel like downtown Seattle. It felt really rough. Nirvana was headlining the show, and that was something I felt like they're finally getting the credit that they deserved for how good of a band they were. But then they delivered the goods too. I mean, you went in there and they came out with these songs. You were hearing these Nevermind songs for the very, very first time and hearing them in a live setting. And I mean, I just remember being airborne most of the show and just jumping up and down and dancing and just thinking, this is the greatest show ever. And then after the show, I remember walking home just thinking, they're too good. They're going to break up. There's this band, this band should be on the top, this is probably one of the best bands in America right now. And I felt like it was like seeing a young Springsteen or Prince or something, one of these young geniuses that you see that, in their prime, which I'd only ever imagined. But I really felt that way about Kurt, like he was this incredible talent. And I thought it's just terrible because in America right now, this stuff will never fly. It'll never get big. It can never break through what's going on right now. And so I remember walking home just thinking, this will be one of these bands we talked about that, came and went.
I remember the first Skin Yard tour I did, which I think was in 1990. It was before 1,000 Smiling Knuckles came out in 91. We had, our per diem was $5 a day, and we didn't get paid a salary. We made enough money to pay for the gas for the van and $5 a day per band member, and we had one crew guy to eat. And you could kind of do it back then. You had to be real careful what you bought. And we all had day jobs, so we always brought a little bit of our own money to fill in the gaps. Usually you'd play a show, and you'd go do an interview at the local college radio station and talk about your show, and then you'd play that night, usually at a little nightclub, or sometimes it was, a couple times we played like Grunge halls, and just sort of wherever the local promoter could put on, this indie show. And over the course of that one day, you would meet the program director at the college radio station, you'd meet the promoter, you'd meet their friends, and you just kind of find out where you could spend the night that night. We were always staying at somebody's house, sleeping on the floor, in sleeping bags. And sometimes if you hadn't met anybody that had a place for you to stay, you'd say that at the end of the night after you'd played your set, say like, hey, we need a place to stay tonight. And then, there's, 10 people would come up and offer you their home to stay. And that's what I liked about that indie punk rock time, was that no matter where you went, in a strange city where you didn't know anybody, there's a community that was just really happy that you were there playing a show and would give you a place to stay. Skinyard had played shows with Nirvana before I was in the band, and then when I joined the band, there were two events that I remember. One was Skinyard was playing a show in San Francisco at this place called the I-Beam, which was, this big cavernous, rock club right on Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. And we got there a day early, and Kurt and Chris from Nirvana were in town to go see this drummer that they were going to audition for the band. So we all met up. I think it was me and Jack and Ben McMillan, two or three of us from Skinyard met Kurt and Chris from Nirvana at the I-Beam to go see this punk band called Scream, whose drummer was Dave Grohl. And they said, yeah, we're just checking out this drummer. I think we're going to audition him for the band. So this would have been in, I think it would have been in early 1990, I think, probably. And so there was nobody in the club. I mean, there's maybe 25, 30 people and us. And, Dave was just a monster on the drums. And we all said, I think that's your audition. You should probably get him in your band before somebody else does. The thing that's special to me about Nirvana is that they reminded me that anything can happen in music, that the dark horse can come out of left field and change the geography of music at a worldwide level, can change it fairly instantly. I think we've all been waiting for the next Nirvana to come along for about 20 years now. And I remember, a few years after Kurt's death, when people started reflecting on this, people would say, oh, the next Nirvana, they're some kids practicing in a basement right now, and, they're gonna emerge one of these days and do the same thing that Nirvana did. But I haven't seen it yet. Nothing on that scale. Although, the other thing to remember is that Nirvana couldn't have done what they did if they didn't have the whole Seattle music scene behind it, creating, everybody working together to create, this scene, this community, which they came out of and which they spearheaded. But had that not come first, I don't think, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. I don't think you could have had the success Nirvana had without, what Seattle did prior to that. Conversely, what Nirvana did, put the spotlight back on Seattle and let Seattle grow, to much bigger heights than it could have without Nirvana.
I think partly it's the weather, because people just hang out. There's another thing that I noticed here in Seattle is the houses have basements. And I think that is kind of conducive to staying indoors, if it's rainy outside, playing your guitar, having some friends over, jamming, maybe writing some tunes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the impression I got. And it kind of fit with my mindset at the time, because in a way I was I wanted to get away from that whole 70-degree weather 12 months out of the year. I know it's insane to hear people, especially from people up here. It was I wanted some seasons or something. I don't know. So at that time when I moved up, now I kind of miss the sun a little bit, but it was great for me, because I was, like I said, I hooked up with some really good creative people, and we just started writing tunes right away.
Did you think that there was something going on here that was going to be really important?
No, I felt like the bands that were playing in Seattle at the time I moved up, which was '83, were really good. They're really good, original, creative bands, and there was a lot of really neat clubs to go to. There was some all ages clubs, which was kind of a new thing to me. But I just saw it as a really vibrant, interesting local scene. I didn't necessarily think that it would become kind of the cultural mecca that it that it was kind of promoted as in the press and whatnot. So I think it kind of came as a surprise to a lot of the bands that started out at the same time. There was a club called the Metropolis that I think a lot of the early rock bands kind of, cut their teeth at. And it wasn't necessarily just all kind of rock bands either. There was a lot of really interesting, trippy, kind of experimental music bands as well. So that was another part of the scene that I really found very interesting.
There's people selling millions of records every day, and whether they're from Portland or they're from Atlanta, it doesn't affect my life anymore, one way or the other. What did affect my life was when Mudhoney sold 50,000 records. Because all of a sudden, there was an identity to the Northwest that the Northwest never had before. And that made a difference to everybody in the Northwest. And I think that before that happened, no one was aware of the Northwest. They might have heard of it. They might have seen Washington State on a map somewhere. But it never would occur to them that it was a place where something could happen. And it was only after that suddenly it was like, oh, you're from up that way? Oh, I better listen to that. And that's where there was an effect. And it didn't mean that we sold any more records or anything. It just meant that people were willing to pay attention. They're willing to give it a listen. They still listen and go, oh, what the hell is this crap, But they gave it one listen as opposed to just tossing it in the pile.
Grunge was a joke, Grunge was something we used to catch kind of like the flu, and it became real, and it was the ultimate learning experience about media and culture. It was, from an anthropological point of view or a sociological point of view, it was one of the most astonishing things I'd ever witnessed. How something that was so utterly fraudulent and stupid, just a bunch of kids making a lot of racket and they didn't even know what they were doing, became real and became influential and became legendary and now is part of American popular consciousness. It's just one of those things. I would like to someday be able to do that with my graphic design. I would like to be able to develop another Happy Face that became part of the popular dialogue and nobody knows where it came from. Do it anonymously, have it leak out there. To be able to do that intentionally would take incredible savvy. I don't know if it's even possible for a person to do it with intent. I think these things happen in a sort of a zeitgeist. There's a dialogue that happens in our culture. It's almost Jungian, and it's like this unconscious dialogue that happens among people. I see what happened with the Seattle scene in grunge as something that had nothing to do with Seattle. It had everything to do with the American pop culture zeitgeist. I feel real fortunate to have been able to watch it up close and firsthand. Not sure I ever want to see it again, but it was real interesting. It was too destructive.
I was bored and my phone rang, and it was Jonathan, and he told me that the New York Times was going to call. I didn't think they would, but he kind of gave me a heads up, like, I don't know, they want to talk about something Seattle. I told him to call you. And a little bit of time went by. I was probably on my second or third pot of coffee, and I was just writing up orders, and the phone rang, and it was the New York Times, and I was kind of just surprised even that they had bothered calling. But they said they were doing a huge section on grunge. The New York Times was doing a huge section on grunge for one of the papers. It was for the style section. And they were going to talk about grunge fashion and the culture, and they figured with most subcultures there's a way that people communicate with each other, and they wanted to get some bits of this lexicon. Well, there is no lexicon. There never was. There was no secret language or weird slang that was just unique to the Northwest. But I was psyched because it was better than writing up orders. So I wasn't quick enough to just start rattling stuff off. So I told the reporter to just kind of give me words, and I would give him the grunge translation, because that bought me a couple of seconds. And I was jotting down a few words that would be fun to kind of mix up, and while I had him on the phone and just jotting stuff down. And but I honestly, I was raised an Irish Catholic kid, and all of a sudden this guilt is starting to come in. And so I decided to make it as absurd and retarded as I possibly could get it to be, so that he would go, "No, this doesn't really exist. Like, come on, this is all a joke." And then I could have said, "Of course it's a joke. No one, there is no lexicon." But that part of my, imaginary conversation, that part of it never happened. He just kept typing as I gave him these words. And he hung up, and I hung up, and he thanked me, and I was like, I didn't feel bad afterwards, because I thought, I did feel bad, but I thought, you know what, that'll never make its way to print. There's no way. It's too absurd. Someone's going to catch it. The sayings are too retarded. And then my mom called me up about maybe a week or two later and said, "You're not going to believe it. You need to go pick up a New York Times right now." I'm like, what the fuck? And she said, "You're in the New York Times, the lexicon of grunge." And I was like, oh my God. So I ran down and I picked up my paper, and I was like, you are fucking kidding me. Word for word. Printed. In the most prestigious newspaper. I couldn't believe it. I was psyched. And I felt a little bit bad.
Yeah, when Nevermind came out, I wasn't surprised at all that it was successful. I mean, I'd always, you could tell they were going to be huge. Just, I don't know, something about his voice sounded right on the radio, like Bad Company or something, it was just like, you knew it was going to, be happening. I'd tell some people, like, like we had Nirvana open up for us in Green Mine tours. Like, tell our manager at the time, we're kind of like stuffed shirt guys. It's like, oh yeah, we gotta have Nirvana open, so then when they're huge, we can open for them. It's like, what? Nirvana? Who are they? Even my friend, I made him buy like the Bleach album. He's like, he was in Arizona, and he wrote me back, "This is horrible. I brought it back to the store. I don't know why you wanted me to buy this." And then the next, then of course, he's totally into him after that. He's like, "Oh, that song's on Bleach? Oh, that's pretty, I like that song." I don't know. I guess some people, from where I was, and like, a lot of, like, or Sonic Youth, I remember, like, the year punk broke that movie, I remember being at those shows, and you could tell that was like, as just before the album was coming out, it's just like really apparent that they were going to be really big.
It was just local talk, like, I hope I still have it somewhere. I had a cassette copy of the advanced Nevermind, because our friends who booked them during the Bleach era were sent the advanced cassette of the album months before it came out. And I put that thing on my tape player in my apartment, and I cried, and I invited every single person over, and I said, listen to this. The world has changed. We are going to experience a new life changed at that moment. I heard it in the songs, and I played it on auto reverse for an entire week at my DJ job. I just had an auto reverse cassette. It was like, nobody's going to listen to anything except for this record, because now the world has changed. No, everyone in my world remembers that I made people come over, sit in front of my tape deck, and shut up for 1 hour. Like, sit here and experience what's experienced. You can't tell me this isn't going to change the world. And I heard, and I didn't have any like record people telling me that. I didn't have, I had my promoter friends who handed me the copy of the cassette to say, like, you're a DJ, listen, this is amazing. There was no doubt, because what happened is it was all of these amazing bands that I saw, whether, I saw prior to their follow-up album, was that this raw, visceral, honest, edgy incredibleness done really with a lot of craft. That was the difference, was like hearing the step from Bleach to this like crystal clear beauty. So like the whole thing of like, it was just such like a brain fuck to hear something so raw and so real done so high class. It was a weird feeling, because none of the bands except for in the 80s, like for me, the Smiths and the Cure, those are not mainstream, although I guess they are now in history. But at the time, I mean, yes, they were a little slicker because New Wave had chorus guitars and it was more jangly. But as far as I didn't like slick music, but I did love everything that came out of Sub Pop and Touch and Go. And then all of a sudden, one of these bands steps out with this really polished version. And I definitely didn't know on an intellectual level, like, this means everyone's gonna love it. I just meant on a musical level that, whoa, they just set the bar so much higher now.